Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Aspect TV YouTube channel. We welcome once again Dr. Brovkin, and we appreciate his time for talking to us. Today, we will start the show talking about the Kazan summit. So, Professor, what are your takes on the Kazan summit?
Yes, this is perhaps a historical event. This is the birth of a new system of trade and international transactions, which is designed to be independent um, from the West. And I am not an economist, and Jeffrey Sachs and others can explain it better. But what I take from this is that Putin spent a great deal of time to create a system of trade and exchange of goods that is untraceable, unpunishable, unsanctionable by the West. And that means that there will be central banks of China, India, Brazil, Russia, South Africa, and new countries of BRICS that would coordinate their mechanisms of messaging between central banks and creating kind of Bitcoin or some other common denominator of value other than the dollar that would direct the channels of trade between these member countries in ways that would stimulate trade investment and would not be under the control of Western banks. This is amazing. If this works, this is a historic change that one hasn't seen for the last 500 years, where trade was controlled by the Anglo-Saxons.
Yeah.
Another point of
Mhm.
this I want to add is that when the European Union canceled their trade with Russian oil, the Lloyd's of London sanctions Russia, and there was no insurance, and it was very difficult for any vessels to enter any ports which are controlled by Lloyd's Insurance. Now, this is a new derivative of the BRICS. They are going to create a reinsurance, which is insurance of insurance companies covered by BRICS, which would make it possible for Russian oil or liquefied gas to be reinsured so that they could go to the friendly ports and continue the trade with liquefied gas, which is big competition to the US one. So the investment bank, the development bank, the mechanism of exchange, they're all in the making. They're not finalized yet, but at least there's an agreement of principles in the memorandum of Kazan that 36 countries, BRICS plus partners, are going to move in that direction, which is of historic importance.
Yeah, you're right, doctor. You see, 36 countries were, represented in Kazan summit, including Chinese Premier Xi, India's Prime Minister Modi, and Turkish Erdogan. Now, this is a huge moment for Russia, where all the sanctions and all these policies were to isolate Putin. While we have seen the success of this summit has proved that Putin is an important player on the of geopolitics on the world stage. So, in other way, the West policies have failed to isolate Putin. What are your takes on it?
Yes, absolutely. It shows, first of all, it shows that he's really a remarkable diplomat. I mean, he's speaking, weighing every word. He doesn't want to offend anyone, and he's trying to work out the difficulties, and there are many. And that means you have to work of now 10 members, and some of them have problems with various issues. For example, there was a very interesting episode when a Brazilian correspondent asked Putin what he thinks about the membership of Venezuela. And that Brazil was against it. And Putin said that he gets along with Lula very well, and they may have different opinions on this, but he's going to try to persuade him that Venezuela needs to be a member. This is going to be in everybody's interest, which shows that behind the scenes, there's a lot of work that we don't see, a lot of work going on, ironing out various opinions and various points of view One other thing which I was surprised that didn't happen was that there was supposed to be the signing of the Russian Iranian Strategic Partnership Agreement, on which they
Mhm.
worked for months, and it hasn't been signed. So this might be something still that they're working on, the wording or something, or maybe they didn't want to appear it right now on the eve of Israeli bombardments. So who knows? But this, in other words, we don't see everything uh, that is going on. But what we see is there's lots of things are going on economic affairs, on trade, on banking, on insurance, on new membership, on the status of the associate members or BRICS Plus. There's lots of things going on, and I think it's remarkable that that Putin positioned himself in this kind of a leadership role of even trying to improve relations between India and China, which is crucial for the success of BRICS. It's absolutely crucial that India and China are true partners and don't have any unresolved issues.
Yeah, the Western media primarily has, overlooked and does not cover the whole event which was taking place in Kazan. But what you think about Turkish intentions to join the BRICS? We have seen that Turkey was intended to join the European Union, and their application has long been, not, come through. And now being a NATO member, trying to join the BRICS bloc, what message Turkey trying to send to his fellow European?
Yes. Yes, I think that's also of historic significance. Truly, a long-term bird's view, it seems that I want to focus on two items here about
Mhm.
Turkey. One is why the Europeans don't want Turkey. And that is because Turkey is a large country of 80 million people, which is the size of Germany. And if you have open borders, the Europeans had fear of the Turks just flooding Europe with migrant workers who actually they need. And there are three, I think, or 4 million of Turks in Europe. But Austria and some other smaller European countries absolutely don't want Turkish workers to have free access to their countries. So this means the geography and history of Europe makes it very provincial. They don't want to open up to bigger countries. But the point is, the Asia is where the big countries are. 80 million is small compared to India and China and Indonesia, which is 200 million, 1.5 billion, another 1.5 billion. So it's like in a historical perspective, you see that the center of business and money making and prosperity is moving to the east. And the
Right.
Turks realized, just like Russia, hey, our geographic position is that we could be either with the West or with the East. And now it seems like the star is rising in the East. And so we can join them. The historical significance of Turkish switch to the East is that Europe is losing its attractiveness. And it's losing its attractiveness because it's one of the reasons is because it's kind of, Musk says it's aging population and they're not doing anything about it. So it's cultural and it's ideological. They're not particularly encouraging families. They're encouraging gays. But another reason is that the West generally, under the bad leadership of the United States, is kind of losing this kind of a vigor of entrepreneurship, investment, and modernization. Today, I heard amazing figure from Jeffrey Sachs in his presentation that China produces actual commodities twice the size of the United States, even
Mm-hmm.
though its GDP is supposedly below that of the United States, which is mostly services. That means that the center of actual industry and production and activities, invention of new things and technologies is shifting to Asia. And I mean, that's obvious that Turkey knows where the tendencies are going to and is choosing the East.
Okay. So BRICS, Peace and Justice Initiative, BBC correspondent, questioned and accused in a way Putin, and that was very unpleasant, question. So how do you respond to West acquisition towards such matters?
Yes, I was very surprised with the kind of a emotional response that you could hear in Putin, because Putin usually is very much in control of himself and usually is very diplomatic and super polite. And here he was just throwing accusations to the BBC correspondent. But what I think is most important is his words, is that we were shown our place, he said, which means that Russia, I translate what he meant by these words, Russia considers itself a great power and has been such for the last 200 or 300 years. And the way that it was treated after the collapse of the Soviet Union is like, this is a quantité négligeable. This is kind of like a gas station with nuclear
Hmm.
weapons. It was disrespected. It said, well, we don't care really what you think. This was very clearly seen in the Yugoslav crisis of 99 when they bombed Belgrade. It was seen in the Kosovo incident when Russia's opinion was not at all taken into account in 94, 95, and many other places where Russia pleaded with them not to expand NATO, and they said, thank you very much, and expanded it. At the time in 97, when Russia was all out to be with the West. It was like, America is leader we want to be with, want to be even with NATO, Putin told us. So this disrespect and this disregard to Russian interests is something that really angers Putin. You could see that this is what caused him throwing accusations. What about your justice? What about your treatment of this and that? So I think that's the very interesting aspect, that his goal is to restore Russia to its proper place in the world, and I think he has shown that in the past several days.
Yeah, that is correct. Now, moving ahead, let me ask you, you must have heard about these North Korean troops being trained in Russia. Western media reporting a lot of things about that. Maybe a dangerous, escalation in the war against Ukraine. So, what do you think? How the West going to respond to that? Because South Korea also summoned the Russian ambassador and registered that protest. And United Nations also talking about the purpose of these soldiers being trained in Russia. Are they going
Yes.
to stand to the front lines in
No,
Ukraine?
they're not going to the
And
front lines.
they are also, talking about maybe, the Russian military has suffered so many casualties that they
No,
need.
this is all nonsense.
Yeah,
Absolute nonsense.
and please also speak about that because they're talking what North Korea is getting in return for
Yes,
sending
I'll tell you.
weapons.
I'll tell you. First of all, uh, Russia does not need North Korean troops to fight.
Mhm.
Second of all, even if they did, there's really nothing wrong with this because it's simply reciprocity. Americans and French and German and Polish soldiers are actually fighting in Ukraine, and it's documented. Some of them are prisoners of war. Some of them are not volunteers, but they actually Polish officers of the Polish army and French instructors that are, carrying the documents that they are on the pay of the French government. So even if there were North Korean soldiers at the front, this would only be matching what the West has been doing for the last 3 years. But they are not going to be there, even though Putin said they have absolutely all rights to be there. It's a sovereign country. Russia has a treaty. The treaty is that when somebody attacks the sovereign territory of Russia, the other side comes to defense. Now, Kursk is internationally recognized Russian territory, and the Ukrainian troops are fighting the Russians there. So, from the purely legal point of view, Russia has a right to involve its allies, in this case North Korea, to help it in its fight in defending its territory. But that's not what it's all about. This is semantics. This is a matter of simply the way you present it to the public. The real purpose of the presence of North Korean troops in Russia is very simple. They are training. There is increased cooperation. And when Kim visited Vladivostok and the Far East, he was taken by Putin to a Soviet launch pad of ballistic missiles and spacecraft. And Kim was very impressed. And I think that there was some kind of agreement of technology transfer and training for missile technology from the Russians to the North Koreans. North Koreans also have some advances in artillery and in shells, and probably they're shipping some shells. So this is like a true cooperation. You give us this, we give you that. Now, what the Russians are probably giving is modernizing their anti-aircraft defense systems such as S-400, S-500, and probably ballistic missile technology, so that North Korea feels more assured vis-a-vis American fleet in those seas. That's probably what it's all about. But the hysteria in the West is simply, I think, a projection of the fact that they don't know what to do because Russia is winning, and they just send their own troops to allow missiles to shoot into Russia. And there's all these debates that have been going on for the last weeks, and we've been talking about them too. But in real fact, the Russians don't need any North Koreans to continue their offensive in Donbass.
Yeah, last night we see that Israel has taken limited strikes on Iran, and the purpose was to only limit it to the military installations. Do you think it's going to escalate the war in Middle East because Iran is also a close ally of Russia?
What I've heard this morning from military observers who follow it very attentively is that the Israeli missiles were shot down very successfully, and only a few of them went through. And what was a message to the Israelis that Russia has supplied Iran with its sophisticated anti-aircraft and missile defense, probably S-400. And that means that the Israeli plan to attack en masse Iran and take out its military installations is not going to work. And this is probably the most important message, that the Iranians demonstrated, okay, you want to bomb us? Try. Nothing's going to come out of it. So this is probably what is going on. And now the Israelis are going to have to figure out whether they can do it on their own or with the American help. Americans are not in a hurry to do it because of the elections, because of all the opposition to continued Israeli onslaught in Gaza. In other words, Israel, as I completely agree with Jeffrey Sachs, who said this morning, it would be suicidal for Israel to go now into war against Iran. They're not going to make it. They're not going to be able to because Iran has its own missiles, which are quite successful. And on top of it, Russia provided defense. I don't want to emphasize Russian role because it's true. Iran has been working on this for decades. They knew that a conflict would come. They have very sophisticated and quite many. I read recently hundreds and hundreds of ballistic missiles. And recently there were even talk of hypersonic missiles that are Iranian production. But on the other hand, Russian backing is important because it shows that if the United States is backing Israel, well, Russia may back Iran. And both of them are strong on their own. But Russian backing is psychologically and militarily important.
Yeah, it's not only the US is supporting Israel, but the whole Western alliance is kind of supporting Israel. We see every day, enormous human rights violation, casualties, camps being bombarded, hospitals, schools. And when it comes to Ukraine, they are very quick to criticize of
Yes,
these violation, and we see a kind of genocide taking place in Gaza.
absolutely.
And how do you see these dual standards in international law and and dual standards of the West when they come to criticize Russia over Ukraine, but at the same time they are providing all support to Israel? And another thing I would like to ask you, Dr. Brovkin, there are reports that Israel go for limited strikes on Iran this time because of the election in United States. And the both candidates don't want to lose any Muslim or anti-war votes. So after the election, this war can escalate.
It's very hard to say what's going to happen because there's these two factors. One is that the United States does not actually have a limitless number of missiles to continue to provide Israel with weapons nonstop all the time. I mean, they are limited. Even the United States, especially after so much was given to Ukraine, that
Mhm.
to produce all these missiles, this would not work. This is not physically possible. But aside from this, there is a kind of a resentment going on in the United States, including in the Pentagon, from what Colonel McGregor tells us,
Mhm.
that the United States is being manipulated by Israel. And we know from history that when big powers are manipulated by small powers, the result was World War One. That Russia decided to defend Serbia, and Germany decided to defend Austria, and then all of Europe was in a murderous war with 18 million people dead. So the United States is aware that there are limits as to what it could do. Even though it's symbolic, but still, Biden's administration did issue a warning, probably in search of Muslim vote, that within 30 days, Israel should stop bombing and destroying people in Gaza, or else there will be no more military aid coming. Now, of course, Netanyahu ignores all of this and continues his arrogant policies of supremacy. But my point is, this is my own view, is that the worst enemy of the Jewish people now is Netanyahu, because he is leading Israel to destruction. His reckless attack on all its neighbors, his reckless imposition of force, relying not even on your own forces, but on the United States, provokes very, very negative feelings towards Israel, not only on the part of the Muslims and Middle East countries, but here in Europe as well. And just any decent person, like Putin said, any decent person who looks at these women and children dying under the rubble cannot be but horrified. And
Absolutely.
therefore, the result is that, if people were thinking, is this what the Jewish state is all about? Is this what, maybe there's something wrong with this idea? Maybe the Jews are just kind of like, uh, should reconsider the way they portrayed themselves as a victim after the Holocaust. And now they are victimizing the same way, destroying thousands every day. Every day, thousands are being bombed and killed. And I think that will eventually haunt them, because before this war in the Middle East, everybody seemed to have accepted that Israel exists and started diplomatic relations. There was like a general acceptance that it's there and it's there to stay. But now there are many more people who are beginning to think, well, maybe there's a two-way solution, but maybe there's a one-state solution, and Israel does not have a right to exist if it is a murderous state. These feelings don't mean that it's going to be realized, but the fact that many people are beginning to pose these questions shows that Netanyahu's policy is self-destructive for the future of the Israeli state.
You are right, Dr. Brovkin. Now coming back to the last question, and this is regarding the Kazan summit. Uh, Putin was so, involved in the success of this summit. Do you believe that after the summit, he can focus more on the Ukrainian conflict and it can be resolved some way soon?
Putin made it very clear this time as well during Kazan summit that the situation will depend on these on the battlefield. We offer negotiations, but only on the conditions that the four provinces are going to be Russian, and it's going to be based on where the things are in the battlefield. The battlefield changes things daily. Now, within a month or two, whatever, the Russians are going to finish what they call liberating or occupying, whichever you prefer, Donbas area. And then the question would be what happens next? If the Ukrainian leadership, if former President Zelensky is still in office, continues to deny, continues to reject any negotiations as such, well, then the Russians are just going to keep going. They're going to keep going and going until wherever. Now, if they say, okay, fine, let's negotiate, then there will be negotiations on a different borderline. And most importantly, it's not the borderline, but it's a neutral status. And that's not easy to do them. For that, they have to change their constitution. And to change their constitution, they have to have first elections of the president, then elections of the parliament. Then they have to have a two-thirds majority in the parliament, in the Ukrainian parliament, to cancel this article that Ukraine wants to be in NATO as a part of constitution. Only when that is done, then there have to be an international conference to which the Western partners have to agree. And only then peaceful negotiations could lead to something real. Now, at this point, none of this seems to be anywhere close to even the beginning. And that means that in the foreseeable future, that means several months, the Russians are going to continue their advance. At least the situation is not going to change until January 21, depending on who the new president is. Now, as I also said in my previous video, if Trump is elected, there is a chance of having a peace conference in February 25. There is a possibility. All they have to do is accept Putin's proposals, neutral Ukraine, 4 provinces, respect of Russian religion and Russian language rights, and then we're done. But if they don't want to, if they insist on this or that, on NATO membership or all of Donbas, well, then the war goes on and the Russian army keeps advancing.
Dr. Brovkin, thank you for all the insights. We appreciate your time and expertise. We continue talking on these crucial geopolitical issues, and we will talk again. Thank
Thank you.
you. Bye
Thank
now.
you. Bye-bye.
Okay.